Most people think they're prepared because they have a few boxes of cereal, some pancake mix, and a couple of bags of oats sitting in the pantry. The problem? A surprising amount of what people consider long-term breakfast food quietly starts degrading long before they ever need it. Sometimes it's the oils that go rancid months before the expiration date even arrives. Sometimes it's moisture that creeps in through packaging that was never designed to hold for years. Sometimes it's a tiny ingredient hidden deep in the mix, a leavening agent, a flavoring, a trace of fat that fails first and takes everything else down with it. And here's what's really interesting. Some of the breakfast foods that last the longest aren't sold in survival stores. They're sitting on ordinary grocery store shelves right now, cheap, overlooked, ignored by almost everyone who walks past them every single week. We're counting down 15 breakfast foods that can stay edible for decades and, in some cases, essentially forever when stored correctly. One of them has been discovered inside ancient sealed chambers thousands of years old and was still perfectly edible. But number one? Almost nobody thinks of it as a breakfast food at all, yet it might be the single most important item you can add to your stockpile. Because unlike everything else on this list, it doesn't just preserve nutrition, it creates it. Let's get into it. Number 15. Table salt. Salt is the most underestimated foundation item in any breakfast stockpile. It feels too basic. Most people think of it as seasoning, something you sprinkle in at the end. But in a real long-term scenario, whether it's a storm that knocks out power for weeks, supply chain disruptions, or something bigger, salt becomes essential, not optional. Salt is a mineral. There's no organic matter to spoil, no moisture to lose, no chemical reaction that degrades over time. Kept dry and sealed, table salt lasts indefinitely. Not a really long time. Indefinitely. It's one of the few true forever foods. Physiologically, sodium is non-negotiable. Your nerves, muscles, and fluid balance all depend on it. Take it away for long enough in a grain-heavy diet, and you start feeling the effects. For breakfast, salt transforms plain oats, rice porridge, or reconstituted eggs from survival fuel into actual food that tastes like home. The mistake most people make is treating it as an afterthought. They grab one small canister and call it done. Buy it in bulk. Store it in heavy-duty Mylar bags or food-grade buckets with tight lids. A few extra dollars buys decades of supply for your entire household. And speaking of things that never expire, number 14, white sugar. Pure white sugar kept dry also lasts indefinitely. It might harden into a solid block over the years as it slowly pulls in ambient moisture, but that is a physical change, not spoilage. Break it apart with a spoon, dissolve it in warm water, and it's exactly as usable as the day you bought it. Sugar does something important that most people overlook completely. It turns emergency food into normal food. Plain oatmeal becomes breakfast. Rice porridge becomes comforting. Powdered milk becomes something kids will actually drink. Most people focus on calories when they're building a stockpile. What they overlook is appetite. If you eventually stop wanting to eat your stored food, your stockpile has a serious problem. Sugar helps solve that. The mistake many people make is buying fancy flavored sugars or brown sugar for long-term storage. Brown sugar has molasses that can lead to clumping and a shorter shelf life. Stick to plain white granulated sugar. Cheap, compact, and eternal when stored correctly. Number 13, pure vanilla extract. This one catches people off guard. When most people hear vanilla extract, they think baking ingredient, not long-term storage food, but real vanilla extract is mostly alcohol. And alcohol is an extraordinary preservative. Unopened bottles can remain usable for decades. The flavor may slowly mellow, but the product stays remarkably stable. Here's where things get interesting. Most breakfast foods eventually become repetitive. Oatmeal, pancakes, porridge, again and again. What keeps people eating those foods isn't always the calories, it's the flavor. A teaspoon of vanilla can completely transform powdered milk, oatmeal, pancakes, rice pudding, and dozens of other breakfasts. Tiny bottle, massive impact. And unlike many flavoring products, it requires virtually no maintenance. Store it cool and dark, then forget about it. Number 12, pure maple syrup. Most people walk right past this one at the grocery store. They see it as a weekend treat, not a survival food. That thinking needs to change. Unopened pure maple syrup, 100% real and not the corn syrup version, is considered indefinitely shelf-stable by food scientists. The high sugar concentration creates an environment where spoilage organisms simply cannot survive. It sits in the same legendary category as honey. For breakfast, a small amount goes a long way. Drizzle it over oats, pancakes, or rice porridge. It brings warmth and familiarity on days when everything else feels uncertain. Research on families in extended disruptions consistently shows that small comforts like this measurably improve morale and mental resilience. The common trap? Buying pancake syrup and assuming it's the same thing. Read the label. If the first ingredient is corn syrup, it behaves completely differently and will not last nearly as long. Get the real thing. Keep bottles sealed until needed. Number 11, non-fat powdered milk. Fresh milk is one of the first things to disappear during any major disruption. It's also one of the first foods to spoil at home. Powdered milk solves both problems at once. Remove the water and you remove the environment bacteria need to thrive. Simple, effective, powerful. Non-fat dry milk, properly stored, can last 2 to 10 years on the shelf. Packed in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, quality versions can push 20 years or more while still reconstituting into fully usable milk. For breakfast, powdered milk transforms everything. Mix it into oatmeal for creaminess and protein. Use it as the base for hot cocoa. Reconstitute it for pancake batter. It turns a pile of dry grains into something that feels nutritionally complete and genuinely familiar. Here's the detail most people get wrong. Whole milk powder contains milk fat, and fat eventually goes rancid. For true long-term storage, always choose non-fat dry milk. You trade a little richness for years of extra stability. That's the smart trade-off. And once opened, treat it like it's under constant threat from the air around it. Powdered milk is hygroscopic, meaning it aggressively pulls humidity out of thin air. Keep a desiccant pack in the container and reseal tightly after every single use. Number 10. Rolled oats. If one item anchors a serious breakfast stockpile, it's rolled oats. The economics alone are unbeatable. A large canister costs just a few dollars and delivers 25 to 30 servings. Nothing else on this list comes close for caloric value per dollar. But here's what most people never discover. Storage method completely changes the timeline. In the original cardboard container in a regular pantry, rolled oats last 1 to 2 years. Transfer those same oats into Mylar bags, drop in oxygen absorbers, heat seal them, and store cool and dark. Now you're looking at 25 to 30 years. Same oats, completely different outcome. The reason is simple. Oats contain natural oils that slowly react with oxygen and eventually turn rancid. Remove the oxygen and the degradation process practically stops. The oats sit in a kind of suspended animation year after year, decade after decade. Avoid flavored instant oat packets for long-term storage. They cost far more per serving. The added sugars and ingredients often degrade faster than the oats themselves, and the novelty wears off fast when you're eating from your stores every day. Plain rolled oats in bulk, sealed properly, give you one ingredient that becomes dozens of different breakfasts over 3 full decades. Number 9. Powdered peanut butter. Protein is where many long-term food plans start quietly falling apart. Calories are easy to stockpile. Protein is much harder. 2 tablespoons of powdered peanut butter deliver around 8 grams of protein and 200 calories for pennies per serving. Few items in the breakfast world offer better nutrition per dollar or turn a plain bowl of oats into something that actually keeps you full for hours. Why not just store regular peanut butter? Because regular peanut butter contains oils, and oils are usually the first thing to fail. Even unopened jars eventually develop off flavors as those oils oxidize. Natural versions without preservatives spoil even faster. Powdered peanut butter removes most of that problem. The oil is pressed out before drying. What's left is a highly stable powder that stores dramatically longer, sometimes a decade or more when packaged correctly in Mylar with oxygen absorbers. Add water and you get peanut butter again. Not identical, but close enough to provide the protein, calories, and flavor that matter most. Keep regular peanut butter on your short rotation cycle, eating it and replacing it within a year or 2. Store the powdered version for the long haul. 2 separate products, 2 separate rolls, both working together in a complete breakfast system. Number 8. Degerminated grits or cornmeal. Hot corn cereal is cheap, filling, and genuinely satisfying. A bowl of grits with a little honey or salt feels like a real morning meal, not emergency rations. But there's a hidden trap on the shelf that catches most people. There are 2 kinds of cornmeal. Whole grain and degerminated. Whole grain keeps the oily germ, which makes it more nutritious for daily fresh cooking, but causes it to go rancid within months. Degerminated cornmeal has that germ removed. Shelf life jumps dramatically to years in regular storage and decades in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. Look specifically for the word degerminated on the label. Most people grab the whole grain version because the packaging sounds healthier, then open it much later, only to find it has turned. For serious long-term breakfast storage, degerminated is the winner. Cook it savory with salt and egg powder or sweeten it with honey and dried fruit. It's comfort food that actually waits patiently for you. Number 7. Powdered eggs. Eggs are one of nature's most complete breakfast foods, offering high-quality protein with all 9 essential amino acids. But fresh eggs are terrible for long-term storage. That's where powdered eggs change the entire game. Whole egg powder with moisture removed and sealed in mylar with oxygen absorbers stays shelf-stable for 5 to 15 years. Freeze-dried versions often reach the upper end of that range. When reconstituted, they work for scrambled eggs and, more critically, as the binding protein in pancakes, biscuits, and anything else you bake from your stockpile. Stir them into oatmeal or porridge for a significant protein boost that turns a carb-heavy meal into something that actually keeps you satisfied and energized for hours. Quality varies considerably. Cheap versions can reconstitute rubbery with off flavors. Mid-tier and especially freeze-dried whole egg powder performs much closer to fresh. This is one item where spending slightly more pays off enormously in what actually ends up on your plate. Number 6. White rice. There's a reason serious food storage plans almost always include white rice. The instinct to stock brown rice makes sense on paper because it's more nutritious, but for long-term breakfast storage, it's often exactly the wrong choice. Brown rice keeps the bran and germ layers, which contain oils. Those oils go rancid. In a regular pantry, brown rice lasts maybe 6 months to a year. Even in mylar with oxygen absorbers, you're looking at roughly 2 years before it starts tasting noticeably off. White rice has those oily layers polished away. Properly sealed and stored, it lasts 25 to 30 years, with some long-term storage tests showing it remains fully edible well beyond that. A 20-pound bag costs very little and delivers hundreds of servings at pennies each. For breakfast, white rice becomes congee, a simple rice porridge eaten as comfort food across cultures worldwide. Sweeten it with honey and dried fruit, or make it savory with egg powder and salt. Warm, filling, and compatible with nearly everything else in your stockpile. Simple rule of thumb: brown rice for daily cooking, white rice for the deep storage layer. Mixing them up is exactly how well-intentioned stockpiles turn into bins of spoiled grain. Number 5. Honey. This is the legendary one. The food found in ancient Egyptian sealed burial chambers thousands of years later, still perfectly edible. Not as a theory, not as a marketing claim, as a documented archaeological and historical fact. Honey doesn't expire, not in any normal sense. And once you understand the science, it makes complete sense. Honey combines extremely low moisture content with natural acidity, and an enzyme from bees that continuously produces hydrogen peroxide. Spoilage organisms never really get a foothold. Those multiple defense systems never shut off. People throw away perfectly good honey all the time because it crystallizes and turns grainy or almost solid. That is not spoilage. That is simply a natural physical process. Place the jar in warm water and it returns to liquid form. Nothing was ever wrong with it. Never refrigerate honey. A cool, dark pantry with a tight lid is all it needs. For breakfast storage, honey serves multiple roles at once: energy, flavor, morale. It pairs with virtually everything in your stockpile: oatmeal, porridge, rice cereal, biscuits, powdered milk, hot tea. Honey improves all of them, and it will outlast nearly everything else you've stored, possibly including the people who first stored it. Number 4, whole wheat berries. This is where the conversation shifts from simply buying food to actually building a real long-term food system. Most people buy flour. Flour feels practical and ready to use right now. The problem is that flour begins degrading the moment it's ground. The protective structure of the grain has been destroyed, oils become exposed, and oxidation starts immediately. Shelf life shortens dramatically. Whole wheat berries are completely different. The grain remains intact. Nature's original packaging stays in place, stored sealed away from oxygen and moisture. Wheat berries can remain viable for 30 years or more. There are documented archaeological cases of wheat remaining viable across centuries. An entire generation can pass and the wheat is still there, still waiting. The catch is that to unlock their full value, you need a grain mill. Without one, they're simply whole grains that require longer cooking. With a hand-cranked grain mill, they become fresh flour whenever you need it. Fresh pancakes, fresh biscuits, fresh flatbreads produced decades after the original purchase. That's an entirely different level of preparedness. Number 3, dried and freeze-dried fruit. Plain oatmeal keeps you alive. Oatmeal with raisins, apple slices, or freeze-dried strawberries actually feels like breakfast. That difference matters far more than most people admit when you're eating the same meals week after week. Removing water removes the environment microbes need to survive. The concentrated natural sugars add another layer of protection. Properly dried fruit in a sealed container lasts 1 to 2 years without special treatment. Freeze-dried and packed in mylar, it stretches to 25 years or longer while retaining far more of the original vitamins because freeze-drying uses low temperatures instead of high heat. That nutritional preservation is especially important because most grain-heavy emergency stockpiles quietly create a vitamin C gap over time. Freeze-dried fruit helps close that gap. Raisins, dried apricots, cranberries, banana chips, freeze-dried berries. These are not just treats. They deliver fiber, potassium, iron, and that bright familiar flavor that keeps meals enjoyable through difficult periods. One important note: avoid varieties coated in vegetable oil to prevent clumping. The fruit store's fine, but the oil goes rancid. Buy unsweetened and unoiled. Number 2. Sprouting seeds. This is the item almost nobody thinks to stockpile as a breakfast food, and it may be the single most important one on the entire countdown. No matter how carefully you build your stockpile, every other item on this list is preserved food. Dried, powdered, sealed, dormant, stable because biological activity has been reduced, paused, or eliminated entirely. And over months and years of relying heavily on preserved foods, one thing gradually disappears from your plate: fresh, living produce. The source of vitamins, enzymes, and living nutrients that no amount of careful storage can fully replicate. Sprouting seeds solve that gap completely. A small sealed bag of alfalfa seeds, broccoli seeds, mung beans, or lentils cost just a few dollars. Stored cool and dry, they remain viable for 4 to 5 years or longer. Then one day you simply add water. That's it. No garden, no soil, no sunlight, no electricity, just water and a glass jar with a mesh lid. Within 3 to 5 days, something extraordinary happens. The seeds wake up. A tablespoon becomes a dense cluster of living, nutrient-rich sprouts right in your kitchen. Broccoli sprouts are packed with vitamin C and powerful protective compounds. Alfalfa brings vitamin K. Mung beans deliver folate and protein. These are not supplements. These are fresh food grown in your home during winter, during supply shortages, during power outages, at any time and anywhere. Every other item on this list is biologically inactive. Sprouting seeds are the only ones that come back to life. Fresh greens, fresh vitamins, fresh living food from a packet that may have been sitting quietly on your shelf for years. That's not just food storage, that's food production. And once you truly understand that difference, it's hard to look at preparedness the same way again. Here's the complete system you've just built. And notice that it isn't simply a list of foods. Every layer serves a specific role and supports the others. Your calorie foundation: rolled oats, white rice, whole wheat berries, and degerminated grits. The warm, filling core of every morning for decades. These are the items that keep you fed, that provide the energy your body demands day after day. Your protein layer: powdered eggs, non-fat powdered milk, and powdered peanut butter. These transform grain-heavy meals into nutritionally complete ones that sustain you through demanding days. Without this layer, a stockpile full of carbohydrates eventually leaves you feeling hollow, regardless of calorie count. Your flavor and morale layer: honey, maple syrup, vanilla extract, dried fruit, and sugar. These keep the food worth eating and prevent the psychological fatigue that quietly builds in long-term stockpiles. Calories keep you alive. Flavor keeps you actually eating. After enough weeks of flavorless, repetitive meals, even disciplined people begin skipping food, which is when a real problem starts. And your living element: sprouting seeds, the only part of the entire system that produces something genuinely fresh that no amount of mylar bags or oxygen absorbers can replicate. The 3-tier approach: think of your stockpile as having 3 time horizons working together. True forever foods at the base, things like salt, sugar, honey, and white rice that simply wait as long as you need them. 5 to 15-year items in the middle layer, including powdered eggs, powdered milk, oats in mylar, and dried fruit that provide the nutritional depth your body needs. And short rotation stock at the top, things like regular peanut butter and fresh baking powder that you actively eat and replace so nothing ever expires quietly in a forgotten corner. Start small. 2 or 3 items per shopping trip. Within a couple of months, the system is essentially complete. Grab mylar bags, oxygen absorbers, and a permanent marker to date everything clearly. Store everything cool, dark, and dry. Those 3 conditions do more for shelf life than almost any other factor. Heat accelerates deterioration more than most people realize. A cool interior closet will outperform a hot garage shelf every time, regardless of how well something is packaged. One organized shelf is enough to give you months of breakfast security that's already paid for and quietly waiting in your home. Real preparedness isn't about panic or worst-case anxiety. It's about quietly building systems before you ever need them, so that if the day comes, breakfast still feels like breakfast. Which of these foods surprised you the most? Was it the sprouting seeds, the degerminated grits, or something else entirely? Drop it in the comments below because it genuinely shapes what gets covered next.